All right, James, I've made you the presenter, and I am recording this meeting as of now. So whenever you're ready, I'll cut out the beginning part.
I'm on.
Yeah.
Okay. Can everyone hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, I can. My
Okay.
mic kind of low though.
Let me know.
And
And
get
Sean
rid
and
of
Karan, if you guys want to mute yourself, unless you're asking a question, that'll make the audio a lot better.
Yes, I was actually looking for that. Oh. That's not it.
Yeah.
Okay, all good?
Go for it.
All right. So basically, first step is you're going to open up PuTTY. You're going to run your staging gateway. Once you're connected through staging gateway, you've basically authenticated to like our main, Amazon web servers. And from there, you can access the database. So what we typically use is this program called DBeaver. And it's just a program that when connected to the proper servers can run SQL queries and access data kind of directly in the database. So data that's in the database and the website are the same. The website pulls data through this database. This is kind of the explicit like text or the reading of the database, if you will. So the website basically just puts a nice GUI on top of it, but you pretty much should always see whatever's in the database reflected on the website. The only time I can think of that not happening is if, let's say, there's been if a member of CLS has done a deletion on data. It takes an overnight cycle for time periods of over 5 minutes. So like you can see, all of our data readings are 5 minutes. Anytime you go to a granularity of greater than 5 minutes, let me just log in here. Okay. So anytime you see a granularity of 15 hour, daily, monthly, yearly, these are additional tables that are rebuilt nightly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sorry, just muted.
Okay. So when data comes into the database, it's always on this 5 minute granularity, which is kind of the raw readings. And then every night what will happen is the database looks at all the 5 minute readings and then kind of rolls up the 3 minutes into a 15-minute reading and writes a new table. And then it does the same for an hour, a daily, a monthly, and a yearly. So if any edits have happened to the database, you won't see them change on these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tables until the next day. But for all intents and purposes, everything you see on this, on the website in the charting tool is exactly what you'll see if you look in the database. So we can check that out, right? So we'll take this PV meter and we'll look at AC power, right? And so this is the node ID that we're going to look up. And let's see, we'll see the most recent reading, right? So 1340, negative 40 or negative 0.46 kW. So what I can do, and I'll show you more about these queries here. I just want to kind of show you the structure. So you can see this is the latest reading, right? And 0.458, which the website, rounds up to 0.46 kW, right? So if we go back, the data point right before that, 0.47, 0.47. So you can see this is the raw data in the database, and then the website kind of makes it nice and pretty, if you will. One thing to know is that the timestamp here, this is in UTC time. So, 1648 is 1848. So this data point just came in. When you look at it, though, on the website, it's always in the time, the local time that the partner is in. So just something to keep in mind. So you can do this for, anything, everything. You can write queries to find, specific parts of, let me see about a good one. You can look up usernames for partners. You can't see their passwords, but you can figure out what their username is, what the ID is. So this may be helpful if you're ever working in the data link and you need to know a partner's ID. You can look that up through here. There are hundreds and, well, I shouldn't say hundreds and hundreds, but a lot of different tables that are in our database, and they hold all sorts of different information. So, there's going to be a table that holds this information. There's going to be a table that holds information based on the site details. And so being able to access it in the database, you're able to see kind of, is there any issues with the data coming in or anything like that. So I guess I'll take a quick stop and see kind of what questions you guys have or where you want me to go from here, just kind of as a high-level overview so far.
So all those things on the side there, are those all different scripts you have saved to do different queries?
These are actually under, these are the different tables within the database. Oh, yeah, so these are different queries that, I've written or I've pieced together, I've hacked them, whatever. And there's probably a whole handful of them that, CLS use that are probably pretty useful to at least get started. But, as a part of like CLS, like what I would find useful is like, okay, someone calls in, they're like, hey, this is my, email address. Like, I don't know anything else. So, you could maybe look up, someone says, oh, there's this site, and you can't really find it easily on the website. Maybe you're able to piece together kind of a query that'll help you find that. So in this case, I put in this guy's email address, and these are going to link a couple of different tables together to give me all of this information here, which may have been useful. You can look up, let's say, last names. So if you have the last name of a partner or of a client, you can pull up all their relevant information and what the site is registered under. So there's lots of different things that you can use this for. I guess what I'd like to know though is like what have you guys come across that we might be able to kind of find out in the database kind of quickly, like on calls with installers or anything like that.
What about, James, some pretty basic stuff that even CLS sometimes has to tackle, just so we're kind of familiar with it on our side?
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at
Okay.
interval energy. and lifetime values for a meter or an inverter, because that's pretty common across all the different sites that we look at.
Okay.
Just to talk about the workflow.
Yeah, and maybe like balanced power. So figure out if like CTs are crossed, something like that.
Yep, that's a good idea.
Okay. So let me really quickly just run through kind of the top part of the queries. So the first line is select, and that just is you're telling it what you want it to return. So you can see I've called out like a whole bunch of stuff up here, like power factor, current, voltage line to line, voltage line to neutral, you know, real power A, B, and C. It's kind of all these different things. The from is going to be from what table. So data recordings is the primary one that holds all the 5-minute data. So when we talk about that there's, you know, 57 billion data points, those 57 billion data points are in data recordings table. This is kind of the large Death Star of data points, if you will. Where you're going to specify where node ID is like this. So you want to say, I want you to return all this info from this table where the node ID is equal to this specific one. And then some other parameters. And the date added is between, you know, the first and this get UTC is just the current time. And then order it by the date timestamp. So these guys of when the data readings are. And then secondly, node ID. I'll explain why I have that here. But so if we...
C for descending?
Yeah, this is descending and this is ascending. I'll explain the reason that I have this secondary node ID ascending on here in a sec. So we run this, and you can see here this ID is the row ID. So this is, you know, 8,000,000,007, you know, whatever, row. And you can see that they're not in order, right? Because if you can imagine, we have, you know, 90,000 sites. They're all reporting at slightly different intervals. They're all getting written to the database at slightly different times. So even though these, you know, are 5 minutes apart, they're not always going to be in order. Does that make sense?
That's literally just the row number in the database?
Yeah, that's, I mean, just like on an Excel table, that's your row ID of the database. So you can see...
Oh, sorry, why are they not in order?
So they're not going to be in order just because the way that they come into the database, it's not like there's only one device reporting in, right? So if there was one device, that's the only thing we monitored, every upload period, it would come in, it would write, you know, row 1, row 2, row 3, but you have 90,000 units.
Okay.
And so there's data constantly coming in, and they're all kind of out of order, if you will.
Okay, cool.
I guess I have a question. What's the use of that?
So the use for that would be something like this. So this may be gone now. I don't. So you could run this one, right? So I could say, you know, I need to find like data spikes and then remove them. So when we do that with like CLS tools, we would say it's kind of like an authentication of like, I want this node ID that's at this row and has this timestamp, and it can kind of cross-check all 3 of those, and they line up and they say, you know, yes, this is in fact the correct point, and you only want to delete or only want to look at that point, so you can specify very quickly, like, show me this point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, then you would want to check the point before it and after it and see if there's like a spike there or something.
Yeah. Because you could say, you know, you're like looking for these points. So like this is a good example, right? So this select star is just every column from data recordings, right, the big table. And I said where ID equals this. Well, you can see there's two of them, right?
Yeah, that's weird.
So
Wait, James, sorry, what is the ID again?
the ID is just the row ID of that point. So the easiest way to think about it is just like on an Excel table, right? So, you know, you have data coming in, whatever it is, it's this value on the sidebar here. That's your row ID.
Right.
Okay.
And one quick thing to note, guys, is like each data point or set of data points from a feed, all the row IDs are kind of happening in parallel. So I think in this case, James, I don't know what example you have up, but typically when you're looking at time series data, even from a single device, the row ID might not be sequential. It'll be in order, but they won't be right next to each other because for multiple data feeds, you might actually have, you know, PV meter from a Conergy site sending a data point at 2 p.m. And then you have another weather station from Safari Energy sending its data point at 2:01. And so, you know, in that very simple case, like one would be row ID 6,000,001 and the other one would be 6,000,002. So that's why each specific row is completely unique. They're not just unique within each device.
Well, how did you get two with the same ID on the last query?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I was going to show you. So this happens where they will have the same row ID. It happens, I think, fairly infrequently, and Bill has said like it's not that big of a deal because you have other things to validate on it. So in other words, like it was trying to write so much data that I guess it doubled the row ID, but it's not like the end of the world.
For our purposes, it's not actually at all important. It's just kind of more context for you guys, but we hardly ever refer to data points by their row ID. Typically, if you wanted tech to look at data or anybody in the company to look at data via the database, if you give them the node ID and the timestamp of the data, that's usually sufficient.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'm just waiting for this one to load here. Probably shouldn't have rerun this again, but so duplicate IDs can happen. It's not the end of the world. It shouldn't happen, but it does. I think just given the number of data points we're collecting at this point. But what I wanted to highlight there is that you can't just say, oh, row ID this, and that's a very explicit like point, and there's nothing else like it. So in this case, you can see we've got the same ID number, but these are two very different nodes. So let's say, you know, this one was the one that I wanted to delete. Like this point, you know, the customer said, oh, this data point's from a meter rollover or whatever it was. If I just said, oh, delete this ID, it would actually have deleted both of these points, and I don't want to do that. So just something you're not going to use all that often, but something I wanted to kind of call out here of.
Wait, James. Are we ever going to use that? Because I don't understand like us looking up a node ID. So that's like the column, right? Or the row in Excel. Like, how would I even know what that is referring to if I just know the ID? If that makes any sense.
So, I mean, the ID you just want to think of as like a unique identifier of that data point in the database. Like Danny was saying before, though, typically if you just say, you know, if I was talking to Tyler or someone else and I said, oh, can you look at, you know, this node ID with this timestamp, I could further clarify and say it also has this ID number, but it would help us hone in just on like, oh, this is a problematic data point, right? Negative 99,970, kWh. This is from a meter rollover. So like, just by running, instead of like trying to comb through and look at every data point in looking for.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So in this one, these were from a couple of Swinnerton sites, right? So in this I said, select these 4 columns, just because the other stuff is extraneous, I don't want it, from the main data recording. And I said where nodes are this one, right? I listed out a whole bunch of them. And my thing that I want to look at is, and power kWh is less than 9,000. So, very quickly you can look up 6 node IDs for all time and say, was there ever a meter rollover event? And boom, this one pops up. So now, like, CLS could actually go in and run the rollover tool and, correct this data point, basically. So let's go kind of in the direction that Danny was, originally suggesting here. So where is this useful, right? So let's say that this is kind of my main query, right? This is the one that I use, let's say 80% of the time. And you're out on a site, or an installer calls you and says, hey, my meter readings are weird and we don't have remote access, right? So you plug in your node ID, and we can leave, the date of from a month ago, or we can make it just from February, right? And he could say, oh, right now, like, I'm seeing, negative data. Why is that? Well, in the database here, right, you can see 1855 in UTC time, which I think is like right now. Yeah, because a few minutes ago was, I can't close this for whatever reason. So you can look over here, right, and you can see, okay, I've got no energy. This is probably like a weird meter or inverter. Slightly negative power factor of 0.05. And as you keep going across, right, maybe what you'd uncover is under, let's say, real power A, B, and C, you'd see that one of these phases or 2 of these phases were imbalanced, or one's negative, and that's offsetting your meter readings. So, pretty quickly you could say, oh, A is reading -3, and B is +3, and C is, -3. So right away you can say, oh, you need to flip the CT on phase A and flip the CT on phase C. In this case, they are balanced, but I'm just making a kind of point of, what you'd be able to look for and help out with. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Another area that Danny wanted to look at was this here of lifetime kWh. This is the kind of lifetime reading that the meter takes. So for most, if not all, the energy readings that we take, we actually just take the meter reading, the lifetime reading from, this 5-minute point to this 5-minute point, do the simple subtraction, and then that becomes your energy here, right? So between 1840 and 1845, we're going to go over here, look at our lifetime reading. Well, it jumped from 670.26 to 670.27, right? So a change of 1. So our database fills in this fact, this column. So we're actually not taking, the 5-minute energy. We're just calculating it based off of the lifetime reading.
Is there some
Make
smoothing
sense?
on the back end so that doesn't look like it keeps dropping to 0? for the energy?
So that meter is probably not like a Verus, if I had to guess. So let's find a site that has a Verus on it, because that integration is just way better. I think McMaster should. Yeah. So if we grab this, you can't actually change database readings, so I would still select no on those if you ever happen to change something. But so this is a lot better, right, Sean? You're seeing like constant energy, and it's fluctuating with the power.
Yep.
Right. So this is direct from the Verus, and if you go over, you'll see that the lifetime is actually in like 100th place, so you can get a little bit more accurate. So from this point to this point, what does that change? It's about 3, or maybe a little less than 3. Yeah, 2, 2.5. For I think commissioning stuff though, if someone's having a problem, the 2 most important things that you should probably look at are like this power factor column and these for real A, B, and C. So between the power factor and real A, B, and C, you should be able to figure out, if they have CTs installed backwards, have phases crossed, anything like that. So do you happen to know maybe a site that would have had that recently? Hang on a sec. Just trying to find out. Maybe this is Safari, Brass Mills. Yeah, so Brass Mills under Safari. I'm going to just find an example and show you kind of what you'll see. So what I would say is, are you going to use this probably daily? Maybe, maybe not, but it can be very useful when trying to troubleshoot stuff and seeing exactly what data is coming into the database. And the 28th, so I'll just go back a couple of days. So see how I ran this and it's blank? It's very particular, like no spacing up here. All right, so looking at this data here, right? We've got negative values, and this looks like it's more than probably inverter draw. And when you look over here, you can tell all 3 phases are reading negative. So you could tell the guy just by looking in the database, like, yeah, you need to flip all 3 CTs on site. They're not correct. I do a slightly different one. Here, same thing, right? You've got all 3 that they're all basically balanced, but they're all reading negative. So you can tell the guy, hey, flip them on site, and he flipped them. So like quickly after you make that change, you can see right here, right? 1 second they're negative, and the next second they're positive. And that's within that 5-minute period. And you can tell here as well, under power factor. So it went from -1 to 1. All right. What other questions do you have, or what else have you dealt with that I can maybe show?
You're talking to us or Danny?
Yep.
James. Oh, us.
No, talking to you guys.
I don't really know any. I usually just go to CLS when I have any issues. So.
What is that manual input one below?
So this was another one that I had entered. So like I think on the Resi side, residential people can actually enter manual readings. They're not like revenue grade at all. This one was just showing, like all of this one customer's entries. So like they had manually been entering data since 2009. And then they accidentally deleted it. So we were able to recover it.
So
what's another one that might be?
Not something you use very commonly.
No, I would say that, as an AE, this or something very similar to this query is probably what you're going to end up using more often than not. Probably the thing that I find most useful is so you can't do this, right, where node ID equals just this without a Modbus like device ID. But if you do dot and then the percentage sign, it'll actually return every node. Okay, yeah, we're getting data from 190, 191, 2, 3, all the way up, 200, whatever. And then.
Can you search by that hub ID?
Yep. So I could modify. Yep. So I could do that. It's that's basically the same. The reason that I like node ID is typically you're trying to find only one thing, and if you do happen to want to, see like, oh, what are the total devices that this Aqua Suite is seeing and sending, good data for? If you run it with this percentage sign, and this is why I have this node ascending. So it orders it 5, 6, 7, and then 190 through whatever. So if let's say the guy on site doesn't have a computer or his computer died or whatever, and he's saying, oh, it's saying an error, and it just they were named just inverters. If you looked in the database and the thing was online, you would see, let's say 190, 191, 192, and then 194. You could say, oh, 193 is not responding. Maybe you forgot to program it. So he could go over to the inverter and be like, yep, I didn't change the baud rate, or I didn't program it at 193. So you can make that change, and then the next upload, you happen to see it. So this IP address is worthless. Doesn't actually mean anything. Should probably take that off, but
Is it actually worthless, or is it just like the local IP?
No, it's not even the local IP. I think it's like the IP address of like maybe AT&T or something. For Resi sites, it can be accurate, course, I don't have one handy. Let me grab this. I have no idea if this is going to work. Yeah, so this is the local IP for Resi sites, but you know, for us, it's not really not gonna help too much. So you can also, you know, do something like this. You know, let's grab this. And so you can do kind of more complex, you know, queries of select some power kWh. So I want you to sum, you know, the entire column of power kWh from data recordings daily. So the reason that I'm using data recordings daily is if you ran this for data recordings for this long a time period, it would probably either sit there for like 15 minutes or just time out, and it would probably lock the database for a really long time, so it's just not effective. So, you know, you bump this up to daily, and I want it from basically inception to now. So if I run this, I can quickly see exactly how much power, you know, whatever meter or inverter made for whatever time period, and it spits it out pretty quick.
And that's summing all of those end-of-day daily averages between, well, for the beginning of time till now kind of thing?
Yeah, so if you, let's say if we run it here, right? So this is the same format. Whenever you do select star, it's just every column. So in certain cases, like here, you know, I can make it say, okay, for this node ID, what's the earliest data point you have and the latest data point you have? Instead of like trying to figure it out, you know, within the charting tool or something like that. But so let's say we run this one and we do node ID. Right, it's all the same node ID, and you can see that these are each day, and this is one of those tables that's built nightly. So you can see, you know, 47, 49, 50, 50 higher than 50, 60 average. And these are all the daily ones. Now you could go monthly. And these are all the values for the monthly ones, right? So you can see how much power per month. But if you wanted to get creative and say, you know, see what's the total sum for everything. On the daily one, it's, you know, 49 megawatts, 0.2. And if you did it for monthly, I'm sure it's the same or very close. Oh, they don't have monthly. So that's the other thing you have to worry about is column names can change. So in the monthly column, it looks like we actually named it correct as energy. But in the other ones, we don't have it named as power kWh. So yeah, not intuitive, the naming of tables.
And the hourly, daily, monthly, all the ones higher than 5 minutes, they're always going to sum to the same, right? Because they're just built off the 5-minute data.
They should. Yep. So they all roll up that, you know, we collect 5-minute data, or we actually collect whatever, you know, data the Aqua Suite's set to. And then anything that's not in data recordings, the, you know, raw data set is just rolled up every night. You know, something like this might be useful too. So if someone's like, oh, like what's the earliest, you know, data point that you have for this site, you can run this pretty quickly and just say that versus going in the charting tool and trying to, you know, go back to the beginning of time and then hover the correct date. pretty quickly. I have it's a ERI. It's another like API interface that's on our platform. So that's like that NRG historical data that I've been working on. That's how those nodes come in. But you can do it for.
So it's a non.
You can do it for. Yeah, it's a non-obvious. It's a. Right. So you can see on this one, like earliest is 2012. Yeah, I'm sure there's, you know, the vast majority of these that I have are probably not going to be useful, but there are probably a bunch that will be. So like this one, select count. This is how many data points do we have for this node. So almost 300,000. So not entirely certain that you will find too much use with this, but if you start running into the roadblock of like, hey, CLS, can you look up this? Rather than going that route, you probably can look it up, you know, using some of the tools here. And if you ask a question, you know, how can I find this? There may or may not be a query for it that's already written. Trying to think of anything else. So a lot of these are like old reports that I used to do. This one's kind of cool. So if you put in a node ID on this, it'll tell you what type of data mapping it's linked as. So this is, once this sends a log file and it hits the listener assigns a data mapping ID so that it knows like where all of the, you know, data goes. If that makes sense. Like what columns all the data kind of fills into. And from that, if you see that that's blank, you probably have a problem, like the listener is getting bad data, it doesn't know kind of what's going on. But there is a way to link that back. I'm just trying to pull that up right now. Data mapping. Yep. So there's this, I can invite you to it, but it basically tells you, you know, exactly which ones they should be mapping to, right? So if I put in this one, (1501), I can tell that it's reading that as this Eaton EVSE. Now, whether or not that's correct, that's what the listener is interpreting it as. So if you ever see like a mismatch or it's blank, something like that, then you know you've got kind of a larger problem maybe with an MBT file or the log files are corrupt in some other way.
Is this table available in Google Drive?
Yeah, this one is. I can share this to you guys. Okay, so we're basically out of time. Doing this database stuff definitely like took me a long while to kind of feel comfortable with while in CLS, and I definitely feel like CLS uses it way more often than, you know, we probably have a need to. But I would say that this is definitely like a pretty strong query because, you know, it takes maybe 15 minutes or so from, so let's say you push data on an Aqua Suite, it completes, it hits the listener, maybe 5 minutes, probably takes another 5 minutes till it gets into the data loader, and then once it's there, it would actually get inserted into the database here, and then it's maybe another 5 or 10 minutes before you'd see this new data show on the website. So you can kind of cut out some time if you're troubleshooting something in the moment with someone.
Right.
Also, James, these scripts that you have on the top, are they the ones that you just made, or are they like available on Box or Google Drive or somewhere?
So like I started with a base set, and then just over time you find needs to tweak them, or you understand what you're kind of doing. So what I would say is I'll send you the link for some of these initial ones, and then you can just copy them and use them.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So I guess let me send this stuff to you guys. I don't know why I can't close this. Okay. Data mapping ID at Sean at Karan. Okay, so you guys should have that. Cool. All right, so what I would say is definitely take a look at the couple of links I posted. Let's try and get your DBeaver at least set up. Even if you can get it set up so that, you know, you randomly get a guy on the phone and he's like, hey, can you see this? You can take that node ID and just drop it in and run the query and kind of see if it's running properly. You know, just one more tool to have in your tool belt. Any other questions right now?
No, I'm good.
Cool. If you have questions or you run into a problem getting DBeaver kind of set up, or you're able to connect to Vertica, let me know and I will try my best to fix it.
Cool. All right, thanks for the help, James.
Right, I agree.
All right, guys, talk to you later.